The bathroom door creaked open at 3:16 a.m. Not a slam, not even a swing, just that slow, steady push, like someone pressing from the other side. I didn't move. I'd locked it, stuffed a towel under it. The heater was off, windows sealed. But the door kept opening, and in the mirror across from me, I saw someone standing behind my bed. Let me know where you're listening from tonight, and if you've ever stayed somewhere that just didn't feel right. And if these stories keep you company, consider subscribing so you won't miss the next one. My name's Dana Ellis. I was 37 when this happened almost 20 years ago now, but I still remember the sound that door made. Back then, I was living in Denver and working remote as a technical editor. The kind of job where every sentence gets sliced up and stitched back together with barely a breath in between. I'd been running on fumes doing 60-hour weeks, and the last straw was waking up one morning with my laptop still open on my chest. I needed quiet. I needed to disappear for a while. So I booked a solo cruise, 7 days, no internet, no meetings. Just a last-minute deal from Miami through the Caribbean. Didn't even look at the itinerary. I just needed a bed, some salt air, and a door that locked. I told my sister I was going. Told my coworker too, so someone would cover my emails. And that was it. I boarded with noise-canceling headphones, 2 paperbacks, and 0 expectations. The cabin wasn't bad. Small but clean, a round porthole window, firm mattress, and one of those old-style hotel bathrooms where the door swings inward and clicks hard into place. I remember liking how solid it felt the first night. You had to really push it to close. Thick hinge, heavy wood. But the second night, that changed. It was just after 3 in the morning when I woke up the first time. I couldn't tell why at first. No sounds, no alarms, just a stillness that felt wrong. Then I noticed the bathroom door. It was open, maybe 5 inches. I always closed it, always clicked it shut. And I'd shoved a rolled towel against it too, mostly to block the hallway light that spilled under the crack. I got up, shut the door again. Hard. Clicked it closed. Checked the towel. It was still there. I told myself it must have shifted with the ship's movement, even though nothing else in the room had moved an inch. Next night, it happened again. Same time just after 3:10 a.m. The door didn't swing. It eased open, like someone was slowly, carefully pushing from the other side. No breeze, no shaking. The ship was calm. The door didn't creak, not really. It just whispered on the hinge, and the air changed. Not cold, not warm, just heavier somehow. I wedged a shoe under the door the next night. A hard-soled one. Didn't help. By the 4th morning, I'd had enough. I went to the guest services desk and asked if someone from maintenance could check the door. Maybe it was uneven. Maybe there was a leveling issue. A guy named Len came up that afternoon. Friendly. Mid-40s. Had that tired, matter-of-fact tone that people in overnight shifts tend to have. He tested the door a few times, nodded, then gave me a puzzled look. "This door's solid," he said. "If anything, it wants to stay shut. You'd have to really push to open it from the inside." He even gave it a shove to prove his point. That night, I decided to film it. I set my phone up on the desk across from the bathroom, balanced it against a coffee mug. I clicked the door shut, placed the shoe and towel just like before. Then I hit record and went to bed. I didn't wake up during the night. I woke up at 6 and went straight to the phone. I expected to see nothing, maybe some shifting shadows, maybe the towel rolling from motion. Instead, right at 3:16 a.m., the door began to open, slow, intentional. It didn't creak. It sighed. But that wasn't the worst part. In the mirror on the bathroom wall behind where I lay asleep, something moved. A figure. He was tall, thin, standing stiff behind the bed. Wearing what looked like a suit, black or navy, hard to tell. But it was wrong. His arms were just a little too long, his head tilted slightly off-center like it wasn't sitting right on his shoulders. He didn't move. He didn't fade in or out. Just appeared, clearly, in the mirror. For maybe 3 full seconds. I paused the video on that exact frame, stared at it for a long time. There was no blur, no static, no suggestion. It was just him, standing there. Except when I looked around the cabin, there was no one. The door was still open. The shoe had been nudged, but I was alone. I brought the video straight to security. The guy at the desk, Josh, looked maybe 23. He didn't know what to make of it. When I showed him the clip, he watched it closely. Just as the door started to open, the video glitched, froze, then cut to black. When the footage resumed, it had skipped past the moment entirely. Could be file corruption, he said, but didn't sound convinced. I'd backed it up to my cloud before showing anyone, just in case. Later that night, the front desk called and said they needed to do a maintenance check. A woman named Margot came by, clipboard in hand, polite but distracted. She barely stepped inside, looked around, took notes. When I asked if anyone had ever reported issues in the room, she gave the sort of practiced smile you only hear in hotel jobs. No, sir, not that I'm aware of. But just before leaving, she said so soft I almost didn't catch it. This room stayed empty a while, after the accident. Then she walked out. The next day, I asked for records. The woman at the desk typed in my cabin number, paused, then said the room had been unoccupied for nearly 11 months before I checked in. I asked why. She just said, I'm not authorized to discuss that. After that, I couldn't sleep. Not really. Every noise became a signal, a whisper. A creak in the floor felt like footsteps. And even with the door locked, towel wedged, and light on, the mirror became the thing I couldn't stop looking at. Not the door, the mirror. I moved to a different cabin for the last 3 nights. Smaller, no porthole, but the bathroom door never opened on its own again, not once. And I stopped recording. I didn't want more proof. I just wanted to get home. But I still tried to restore the video. Used recovery software. Nothing worked. The same exact glitch at the same exact second. 3:16 a.m. And every time I open that folder now, my phone hesitates, freezes, just for a second, just long enough to make me stop, just long enough to make me wonder. What would have happened if I hadn't looked at the mirror at all? I don't usually talk about this. It's the kind of thing people either dismiss or lean into like a punchline. And I don't have the stomach to explain that, no, I'm not overreacting, and yes, it really happened. I took that cruise in early spring, a couple months after my divorce. My friends had pitched a Vegas girls' trip, but I wasn't in the mood for sequins and shouting. I wanted silence, salt air, something that floated and drifted far away from anything I'd have to carry. It wasn't a luxury ship, not one of the bottom-tier ones either. Middle of the road, just like most things in my life. I booked a balcony cabin and told no one except my sister. The first few days passed like I hoped they would. I read. I stared at the ocean. I woke up early and walked the deck before most people were even out of their rooms. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel needed. Just a woman sitting alone in the middle of the sea. The third night, I ended up at the casino. Not to gamble, I hadn't planned that. I just followed the sound of bells and the buzz of jazz music spilling down the corridor after dinner. The place was nearly empty. One staff member behind the counter, a couple of older passengers parked at machines. The man behind the register smiled when I walked in. He had a thick beard and one of those old-school bow ties that was a little too tight for his neck. His name tag read Mike. There was something kind about his face, soft lines, the kind of expression people use when they're tired, but trying to stay friendly. I took a seat near the back at a penny slot, didn't even think twice. I just sat, hit the button, and zoned out. About 20 minutes in the machine, lit up like a slot canyon in the sun. I'd won something, not much, but enough to make the little coin meter go haywire. Lights, sounds, that strange mechanical cheer. Mike came over and congratulated me. He asked if I wanted a picture for the winner's wall. I laughed and said, "No thanks." He didn't push, just smiled and said, "Lucky night," then walked off. But something about how he looked at me lingered. Not threatening, not flirty, more like knowing. Like I'd already done something I wasn't aware of. Back in my room, I ordered wine through the app and sat out on the balcony for a while. It was warm, but not muggy, just that soft breeze that pulls across the water after dark. I left the curtains open, the TV on a little. That gentle background static always helped me sleep. At some point, I changed clothes without thinking. Just a normal routine. I'd lived alone before it didn't feel unusual. I fell asleep with the balcony door half cracked just enough to let in air. The next morning, there was an envelope under the cabin door. Plain white. No seal. No writing. I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened it slowly. Inside was a photo, glossy paper, slightly curled from the edges, a still frame, high resolution. It was me halfway through undressing. Taken the night before. I recognized the lighting immediately, the dim yellow from the ceiling lamp, the flicker of the TV behind me, the shape of the shadow across my shoulders. The angle was wrong, though, slightly above eye level, like a camera set in the corner of the room. My first thought was the worst kind of fear. Not ghosts, not dreams, real surgical fear. I tore through the room, checked the smoke detectors, the lamps, the electrical sockets. The only thing I hadn't paid attention to was the black dome in the corner of the ceiling, one of those circular units that looks like a motion sensor or sprinkler head. This one had a red ring faintly glowing. I'd missed it completely. I went straight to guest services, tried to stay calm, held the envelope tight against my chest. The woman behind the counter smiled, ready to hear about towels or buffet complaints. When I asked if the cabins had cameras, her face shifted just slightly. She said all rooms had domes for motion detection, nothing recorded. I showed her the photo. She stared for maybe a second too long. Then she asked me to wait. A man came out from the back about 5 minutes later. Navy jacket, close-cropped hair. Introduced himself as Eric from ship security. He led me into a small side room. Cold. No windows, just a desk and 2 chairs. I placed the photo down carefully. He didn't touch it, just leaned over and looked. Then he asked when I'd found it, if I'd had guests in my cabin, what time I went to bed. It wasn't until I asked him directly if someone on the ship had access to cabin cameras that his posture shifted. He stood, walked to a locked cabinet, pulled out a folder. Inside were 6 photos. Different women, different rooms, all alone. One brushing her teeth, another crying. One was asleep with the covers halfway off her body. All of them unaware. Eric didn't say where the photos came from, but he did say in a very quiet voice that there had been an internal systems issue. Apparently, someone had figured out how to reroute the feeds. Just a few, just enough to avoid detection. It wasn't supposed to be possible, but it had happened, and someone had been saving what they saw. I asked if it was Mike, the bearded man in the casino. Eric didn't answer, but he looked at the folder again, and that silence was all I needed. They offered me compensation, a full refund, a discount for a future trip, a non-disclosure agreement paperwork that smelled like lawyers and fear. I signed it. I didn't want to stay one more night. I flew home early, deleted the cruise app, closed the curtains in my apartment, unplugged every camera in my laptop and phone. My therapist called it situational hypervigilance, but I don't think that's quite right. I still have the photo, folded, in a drawer, not because I want to remember, but because I'm terrified of forgetting. That man smiled at me. I thanked him. I trusted him. And I still don't know how many others he watched, or what he did with what he saw. I've lived in Texas my whole life, but in 2012 my mom talked me into a cruise, just the 2 of us. One of those last-minute deals she'd found through an email newsletter. I wasn't working at the time, and had just come off a breakup I was too embarrassed to talk about. The idea of a quiet week on the water didn't sound so bad. The ship left from Galveston and made a big loop through the Gulf, Cozumel, Roatan, the usual spots, nothing fancy, just soft drinks, sunburns, and every type of fried food you can imagine. Our cabin was at the very end of a long hallway tucked near a door marked Crew Only. That placement turned out to be part of the reason I'm telling this story now. The first few nights I slept better than I had in months. The ship had that low, constant hum that gets into your bones. The walls were a soft beige with little gold-colored sconces that gave off just enough light to feel safe, but not enough to bother your eyes. But then I started waking up. It always happened around the same time, just after 2 in the morning. At first, I thought it was the ship shifting, or someone in a nearby room slamming a door. But it wasn't that. It was footsteps, not heavy ones, just a steady, rhythmic click, like someone walking down the corridor in heels, sharp but deliberate, not stomping, not rushing. Click, 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 then silence. And the silence always came when the footsteps reached our cabin door. The first night I sat up in bed, heart racing. No knock, no announcement, just the steps, then nothing. When I finally got the nerve to check the peephole, there was no one there. By the third night I was wide awake before the steps even started. It was like my body already knew they were coming. I lay in the dark, counting the clicks, breathing slow so I could hear better. Again, they stopped right at our door. I told myself it had to be a crew member, maybe someone on a graveyard shift. But that made less and less sense. There were no other rooms past ours. The hallway ended at that staff door. No one had any reason to walk that way. I mentioned it to my mom over breakfast, half expecting her to laugh. But she just shrugged and said, "Ships have thin walls. Probably someone in heels next door." Except there was no next door. Just that sealed stairwell. On the fifth night, I decided I wasn't going to just lie there and listen again. The second the footsteps stopped at our door, I got up and pulled it open. Down the far end of the hallway, I caught a glimpse of her. A woman, just as she turned the corner and disappeared through the crew door. She wore a dark blue uniform, long skirt, stiff collar, matching hat. The kind of thing flight attendants wore in the 1960s. Not something any modern cruise employee would have on. What really stuck with me, though, was how she moved. Her body didn't sway when she walked. It was almost too smooth, like she was gliding. I stood frozen in the doorway. My mom stirred behind me, asking what I was doing. I told her I'd seen someone going through the staff door. She mumbled something about calling security, then rolled back over. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I stopped a staff member near the dining area, a young guy pushing a cart of coffee urns. I asked him about the stairwell next to our cabin. He looked confused for a second. Then he said, "That one's been sealed for years. We don't use it, leads to nowhere." But I saw it close behind her. I heard the latch. That afternoon, while we were packing to head home, my mom pulled out an old photo album from her suitcase. She'd brought it along without telling me. Said she thought it'd be fun to look back at our first cruise together back when I was 3. We flipped through the pages, sun hats, juice boxes, my dad, with a mustache that should have been illegal. Then I saw it. One photo taken on the upper deck in bright sunlight. My mom holding toddler me near the railing. In the background, just behind a lifeboat, was a blurry figure. A woman in a navy blue skirt and matching hat, standing completely still. Not smiling, not walking, just standing, looking off into nothing. I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at the photo while my mom flipped to the next page. Later that night, back at home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The uniform, the exact shape of the hat, the way she moved or didn't move. I tried searching online vintage cruise uniforms, staff dress codes. Nothing matched exactly. The closest was an ad for a now-defunct cruise line from the early 90s. The cut of the collar was similar, but even that felt off. Eventually, I emailed the cruise line's customer service. I described what I saw and even attached a scan of the old photo. I didn't expect much. 2 weeks later, they replied. Short message. They had no records of that uniform ever being used on their ships. And the stairwell I mentioned sealed permanently after a fire drill malfunction in 2002. No guest access permitted, it said. That was it. I still have the photo. It's in my nightstand drawer in a sleeve behind a few birthday cards and an old receipt I never threw away. Every once in a while, I take it out and just look at her. She's blurry, but not enough to be a mistake. I don't know who she was, but I know what I saw. And I've never stopped wondering why she kept stopping at our door. The last real job I had before switching to maintenance was as a short-haul trucker around South Florida. But after the divorce, I needed something more stable. Something with longer contracts and fewer long nights on the road. That's how I ended up on cruise ships. 10-day rotations, decent pay, and enough solitude to keep my head clear. By 2016, I'd been working night shifts as a janitor aboard ships for just over a year. My son, Ethan, was 6. My sister watched him when I was gone. It wasn't ideal, but I made it work. You learn quickly that ships never really sleep. Even when the bars close and the halls go dark, there's always something buzzing. Some voice through a vent, some drawer left half open, and sometimes someone who shouldn't be there. It was the 4th night of a 10-day loop out of Tampa. Most guests were in their cabins by midnight. I was halfway through clearing trash bins when I saw him, a pale, thin man, sitting on a bench at the very back of Leo deck, staring out at the water. He wore a light windbreaker zipped to the neck, hands folded in his lap. He looked exhausted. As I passed, he said something about how the ocean made him feel small at night. His voice was soft, like every word took effort. I stopped for a minute, just nodded. He said his name was Drew, said he was a freelance writer working on a book about isolation. Over the next few nights, I'd see him again, always in the same spot, just sitting there, calm, quiet, watching the black water stretch past the ship's wake. We talked a few times. He asked about my job. My route even joked that I probably had a master key to every room. I laughed, told him it was true, said the master badge was the only perk of cleaning toilets on a moving hotel. He smiled at that, a little too long. But I didn't think much of it then. People get weird on cruises. Something about being disconnected from land makes folks act either loopy or lonely. I figured he was the second kind. On the 7th day, Drew didn't show up, or the 8th. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he got off at the last port. Maybe he just needed sleep. Then that night when I started my shift, I noticed my locker was open. I always lock it, always. The padlock was still looped through, but it wasn't latched. My uniform jacket was missing. So was my badge. I went straight to security. They barely glanced up, said it was probably a mistake, told me to check again, said they'd make a note. That whole shift I worked without access, couldn't get into half the supply closets, had to borrow gloves from the laundry room. The badge was everything. Without it, you were just a guy with a mop and no doors. 2 nights later, the jewelry boutique on Deck 3 was broken into. No camera footage, no alarms, but someone used a high-clearance badge to get through 2 doors. Only a few items were taken, nothing high value. Just enough to make it a problem. Security pulled me aside the next morning, asked if I'd loaned my uniform to anyone, asked if I'd been drinking. I told them what happened. They gave each other a look like they'd heard that excuse before. "We'll review footage," one of them said. That was all. The next day, someone tried to access the engine room. Whoever it was had the right badge, but they ran when the door didn't open. That finally got their attention. They brought me into the security room, showed me the hallway camera footage, and there he was, Drew, wearing my jacket, my name stitched on the chest, my badge clipped to the front. At first, I thought it was me. Same walk, same uniform, same cap pulled low over the face. But when he turned toward the camera just for a second, I knew. It wasn't me. It was someone who'd studied me, studied how I stood, how I moved, how I spoke. The head of security leaned in and said, "He's not in the system. No room, no key card, no ID." He vanished the next morning. We docked in Puerto Rico. They swept the ship, checked every cabin, even storage rooms. Nothing. The room Drew had claimed to be staying in empty, not registered, cleaned. Sheets tucked in tight like no one ever touched the bed. The only thing they found was a mug on the balcony table and a folded towel on the pillow, like he was following protocol, like he belonged. I finished that contract, but something changed after that. I didn't talk to crew much anymore. I stopped leaving my locker unlocked even for a minute. I kept my new badge clipped inside my shirt on a chain like it was jewelry. And then, 3 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from the Oregon DMV. Said my driver's license had been suspended after a DUI arrest. I've never even been to Oregon. I called, gave my name, date of birth, social. The woman on the line paused, said it all matched. There was a mug shot attached to the file, blurry, dimly lit, but it looked like him. Drew, or whoever he really was. The identity theft tore through my life. It took 6 months and a lawyer to clean up the damage. My credit dropped. My tax forms were rejected. I had to carry notarized letters to prove I was me. But that wasn't the worst part. What still gets me is the fact that he didn't just steal numbers or files. He wore my name, my clothes, walked through hallways as me, slept in a bed that might have been mine. Every now and then, when I'm standing at the back of a ship, I wonder if he's still out there, watching someone else, learning a new walk, practicing a new voice. Some people disappear because they fall. Others disappear because they're finished wearing your face. Back in 2018, my wife and I took a cruise for our honeymoon, 5 nights Eastern Caribbean, booked with one of those leftover gift cards we'd nearly forgotten about. We'd just gotten married the week before in a small courthouse ceremony. Nothing fancy, just us and a few friends. At the time, we were living in a cramped apartment in Tampa, juggling work stress and family noise. The idea of no email, no cooking, no deadlines. It felt like breathing for the first time in months. We didn't splurge on the cabin, but it was decent, a mid-tier room on deck 7 with a small balcony. It shared a wall with just one other cabin, which turned out to matter more than we expected. The first night we met the man in the room next to us. He was already standing in the hallway when we arrived, leaning on the metal railing outside his door, holding a drink in a clear plastic cup. Said his name was Rick, but everyone just calls me that. He looked maybe late 60s, wispy gray hair. A windbreaker zipped up to his neck despite the heat. His smile felt off somehow, too fixed, too practiced. He kept calling Brooke young lady, even after she introduced herself. We laughed it off as old-school charm. It wasn't the first odd personality we'd run into on a cruise. That night, around 2:00 a.m., I woke to the sound of pacing. It was slow and steady, back and forth, just on the other side of our shared wall. Not stomping, not dragging. Just 5 or 6 steps, then a pause, then again. At first I thought maybe Rick couldn't sleep, but it went on for nearly an hour. Then the tapping started, not loud, just a quiet rhythmic tick like someone gently tapping their fingernail against the metal air vent near the ceiling. Brooke was already awake. I could tell by the way she was staring at the wall. "Do you hear that too?" she whispered. I nodded. Neither of us moved. Eventually the sound stopped. but neither of us slept well after that. The next morning we saw Rick again. He was already outside when we came back from breakfast reading a paperback with the same drink in hand. He smiled like nothing had happened, asked if we'd tried the French toast. Brooke answered politely. I noticed his cabin door was slightly open behind him, not wide, just cracked. That caught my eye because cabin doors on ships lock automatically. You have to wedge them open on purpose. We didn't mention the noise. That night, the tapping returned earlier this time, started around 11:30 p.m., just after we got back from the promenade deck. Same pattern pacing, then tapping, then something new. Whispers, not words we could make out, just low, steady murmurs, like someone speaking directly into the vent between our rooms. Brooke sat up. Her eyes were locked on that metal grate near the ceiling. I walked over and pressed my ear to it. The voice wasn't mumbling. It was intentional, calm, almost conversational. I knocked once, just loud enough to be heard. Everything stopped. No more footsteps, no breathing, just silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. We reported it to floor staff the next morning. A guy named Malik nodded, jotted something on a clipboard and said, "Cabin walls are thin. Could be snoring or a TV." He said he'd check it out later. We didn't expect much. But that afternoon on our way back from the pool, Brooke stopped suddenly in the hallway. Folded neatly on the railing that separated our balcony from Rick's was a pair of her underwear. It was a specific black and pink set she'd packed but hadn't worn. I watched the color drain from her face. She picked it up carefully like it might burn her fingers. Folded perfectly, creased like it had just come from the drawer. Rick's door was closed. We didn't sleep much that night. I pushed a chair from the vanity under the door handle. Brooke kept the lights on. We left the balcony curtains open just enough to see if someone moved on the other side. Around 3:00 a.m., I thought I heard the faint click of our door handle shifting. Not turning, just pressure, like someone testing it. I sat up, listened. Silence. The handle stopped moving. We didn't open the door. We just stared at it, listening. Eventually, we fell into a kind of shallow sleep, the kind where your muscles stay tense and your ears don't turn off. By morning, Rick was gone. We didn't see him at breakfast, didn't see him in the hallway. His door stayed shut. That evening, we came back from dinner and checked the log on our room's door. The app tracked every time a key card was used. There were 4 entries during the time we were out. Brooke and I had both taken our cards with us. No one should have been inside. We stepped in slowly. The lights were off, but something felt wrong. My shaving kit had been moved. Brooke's suitcase was unzipped halfway. Every drawer was slightly ajar. Not ransacked, just touched. Opened, explored. We called guest services. They sent someone from security within 15 minutes. The officer scanned our lock and confirmed only 3 cards had ever accessed our room. Mine, Brooke's, and Rick's. But when he checked the records, he frowned. "There's no one assigned to 7147, he said. "That room's listed as unoccupied." Brooke pulled up a photo she'd taken on the second day, a simple selfie on the balcony. In the background, if you zoomed in, you could see Rick's arm resting on the railing of the neighboring cabin. The officer didn't say much after that. He typed something on his tablet and stepped out. They opened the cabin next to us later that night, let us watch from the hallway. It was clean, too clean, Bed made, no bags, no trash. The air smelled faintly like cologne, something sharp and musky, not fresh, more like it had been lingering. Behind the bathroom mirror, they found a folded napkin. No names, just a list of numbers and a single word: observation. They moved us 2 decks down that night. Brooke didn't talk much the next day. She kept checking her bag, repacking, unpacking, like something new might show up in it at any moment. I triple-checked every lock, watched every door that opened near us. We never saw Rick again. When we got home, we tossed out half our luggage, changed every password, filed a report with the cruise. Line's corporate office. They offered us a 15% discount on a future trip. We never used it. To this day, Brooke still double-checks every latch in every hotel we stay in. And I can't walk past a cracked cruise cabin door without wondering if someone's standing just inside. Listening. Waiting. Watching. I'd never left the mainland before, not even for spring break. So when Vanessa talked me into booking a post-grad cruise, it felt like a real milestone, one of those now or never decisions you make when you're 24, and the world still feels manageable. We'd just finished undergrad at Arizona State, 4 years of caffeine deadlines and pretending we weren't broke. That June cruise was our reward. 7 nights, just the 2 of us. No parents, no essays, no 8 a.m. lectures, just the ocean umbrella drinks and whatever happened next. Our cabin was small but cozy. 2 single beds pushed against opposite walls. 1 tiny desk, 1 mirrored closet that made the whole room feel strangely stretched. I remember laughing the first time we tried to get dressed at the same time. Elbows bumping the curtain, sliding crooked, the closet door swinging open when the ship rocked. It was tight, but it was ours. The first night was what you'd expect: rum punch perfume, a crowded dance floor. We staggered back to our room after midnight, giggling at nothing, and locked the door behind us. I watched Vanessa check the deadbolt. It clicked twice. We both heard it. The second night, I woke up cold. Not chilly cold, the kind that clamps your jaw and stiffens your back before your brain can catch up. I sat up slowly and saw the door was cracked open, just enough for the hallway light to cast a line across the carpet. My first thought was that Vanessa had stepped out and forgot to pull it shut, but she was still in bed, facing the wall, breathing steady. I got up, closed. It relocked it and stood there for a moment longer than I meant to. The hallway had gone quiet again, but the unease didn't. The next morning I told her what happened. Vanessa blinked, still brushing mascara from the corner of her eye, and said, "You probably didn't latch it all the way, but I had. I was sure of it. Still, I let it go." It's easy to second-guess yourself when you're not on your own turf. New place, new routines, unfamiliar sounds. Except things kept disappearing. First, it was my lipstick, the deep red I'd set right next to my charger before bed. Then a bracelet, a small gold one my sister gave me last Christmas. I'd left it on the nightstand after dinner. It was gone the next morning. Vanessa just laughed and said, "Girl, you're a mess. You probably dropped it on the pool deck." But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. By the 4th night, I was taking photos of everything, my purse, my toiletries, my jewelry, just to prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind. I didn't tell Vanessa about the photos. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Not yet. That night, I zipped up my bag and locked the door myself. Deadbolt, handle, everything. I even shoved one of my sneakers in front of it, not enough to stop someone from coming in, but enough that I'd know if it moved. We stayed out late on the upper deck. Movie night, popcorn laughter, the kind of cruise joy that feels pre-packaged but still warm. When we came back, the room looked normal, except the sneaker had shifted. About a foot to the left, not kicked or stepped on, just moved, gently, like someone had nudged it aside and put it back imperfectly. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the ship sounded sharper, more deliberate. Around 2:00 a.m., I woke up again, that same cold, that same stillness, and I heard it. The softest metallic click. Then the knob turned, not all the way. Just a slow, steady test, as if someone knew exactly how to open it, but hadn't decided whether to push yet. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. Vanessa snored once and shifted, still asleep. After what felt like a full minute, the knob stopped. No one came in. Nothing else moved. When I finally got up to check, the door was locked again, but the sneaker was across the room. The next morning, I told Vanessa everything. The handle, the cold, the bracelet, the photos. She went pale, then admitted her headphones had disappeared 2 nights earlier. She hadn't said anything because she thought she'd just dropped them somewhere until now. We went straight to guest services. The woman at the counter didn't flinch, didn't react much at all, just said she'd report it to security and offered to move us to a different room. We didn't argue. They gave us a room 2 decks up, same layout, different hallway. We packed fast and were out within 20 minutes. That night I slept with the light on. Vanessa double-checked the door. Nothing strange happened. The next morning we went back to the old room just to grab the last of Vanessa's stuff, a sweater, some toiletries she'd left in the closet. The cleaning staff was already inside when we got there. I stepped in first, and on my pillow, sitting in the exact center, was the bracelet I'd lost, coiled neatly, gold catching the light, placed like a gift, not dropped, not forgotten, not hidden, placed. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, staring, feeling that same quiet panic stretch through my chest. Vanessa froze behind me. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. I turned to the woman cleaning the room and asked if she'd found the bracelet while tidying up. She looked confused, then said I hadn't even started on that bed yet. Later that day, someone from security called to follow up. He said they'd reviewed the digital keycard logs for our old room. No entries between midnight and 7:00 a.m. Not from our cards, not from any staff or master keys. I asked if it could have been a malfunction, a bypass. He paused for a long time, then said quietly, "That's not supposed to be possible, ma'am." Vanessa and I didn't talk much the rest of the trip. We stuck to crowded spaces, ate meals in the buffet instead of the formal dining room. I kept my new key card in my pocket even while sleeping. No more things went missing. No new disturbances. But the atmosphere between us changed, like we'd both seen something we couldn't name. And now we were just trying to hold the rest of the trip together until we could get home. When we docked, I left the bracelet behind, still on that pillow, still perfectly coiled. I don't know if someone copied our key card, or if someone never left that room to begin with. But I do know this. Every time we left, the door was locked from the inside. I used to drive long stretches across Montana for work, back when I was handling insurance claims that sent me out to farms and ranches hours apart. I never liked the highways after dark, but one night in 2011, exhaustion left me no choice but to stop at a roadside motel about 30 miles outside Helena. It was one of those low, flat buildings with buzzing neon half-lit against the dark. The sign simply said, "Vacancy," in red letters that flickered more than they shone. The woman at the front desk looked to be in her 70s. Her name tag read Mrs. Kettner. She checked me in without much small talk, sliding a brass key across the counter instead of a card. She told me my room was at the far end near the ice machine. I remember she paused before handing me the key, as if she were thinking of saying something else. But instead, she just smiled, faintly, wished me a good night, and looked down at the ledger on her desk. The lot was empty except for 2 trucks and my sedan. The air was colder than I expected, with the sharp smell of pine. My room was clean in a plain way, with floral curtains that didn't quite reach the sill, and a lamp that flickered when I turned it on. I dropped my bag, ran the tap until the water stopped groaning, and sat on the bed. That's when I heard it 3 soft knocks. Through the wall, spaced evenly from the room next door. I thought maybe someone was trying to get my attention by mistake, maybe kids or another traveler. But when I stepped out into the corridor, the room beside mine was dark. The curtains were drawn and no light spilled from beneath the door. Still, when I put my ear to the wall back inside, I could hear faint sounds. Not voices exactly, more like a steady scraping, the kind you might hear if someone were dragging their nails over wood. At midnight, I woke to the noise again. This time it wasn't scraping, but a slow rhythm, as if someone were pacing from wall to wall. I lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening, as the footsteps stopped right where my bed lined up with theirs. Then came the breathing, low, heavy, and steady, pressed right against the wall behind me. I considered calling the front desk, but it felt foolish to complain about noises in a motel. Instead, I got up, opened my door, and crossed to the next room. I knocked once. The sound stopped instantly. The silence was heavier than the footsteps had been. When no one answered, I went back to my room, but I left the light on. By morning, I decided I'd imagined most of it. Sunlight made the place look less threatening. I packed my bag and went to drop off the key. Mrs. Kettner looked up from her ledger when I approached. I told her the night had been fine, but I mentioned the noise from the next room, thinking she'd want to know. Her pen froze mid-stroke. She set it down carefully and folded her hands. "Which room were you in, Mr. Mercer?" she asked. I told her. Her eyes flicked to the ledger. She tapped one long, polished nail on the page. "That side has been empty for months," she said softly. "We don't rent it anymore." I wanted to argue to tell her I'd heard it clearly, but she just gave me the same faint smile from the night before, like she'd been expecting me to say something. She slid the key into a drawer, wished me safe travels, and that was all. Driving away, I kept looking in the mirror at the row of doors. The curtain of the room next to mine had shifted just enough to let in the morning light. I could have sworn someone was standing there, perfectly still, watching me leave. That was the last one I'll share tonight. Thinking back on these stories, I've realized that what unsettles me most isn't always the details. The scraping on walls, the empty hallways, the strangers who don't act quite right. It's the silence that follows. The way people look away instead of answering questions, or the way an empty place feels heavier than a crowded one ever could. None of these moments were supposed to matter. They were just motels, back roads, gas stations, and cabins, ordinary places you pass through without thought. But sometimes those are the places that stay with you, the knocks you can't explain, the faces you never forget, and the silences that follow you long after the lights are out. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you for listening. I can't say I have answers for what happened in these stories, only that they're true enough to me, and they linger even now. Be careful out there wherever you rest your head tonight. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, please follow the channel. Share this with a friend and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell me, have you ever stayed somewhere that felt wrong? Even if nothing obvious happened, I'd like to hear your story in the comments. Good night.